Imagine being just a teenager, sitting in your bedroom, and suddenly having the power to shake the most secretive intelligence agency on Earth. This is not fiction. This is the story of Default and Kraka, the kids who hacked the CIA. From prank calls to exposing top-secret documents, their journey will take you deep into a world of chaos, power, and consequences. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to our channel Zimo so you never miss the stories that reveal the hidden truths shaping our world. Asterisk. It was a chilly autumn day in October 2015. The kind of day that presses cold against your skin, that makes the trees shiver and leaves crunch underfoot. In a quiet suburb, John Brennan sat in his office, the head of one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world, the CIA. His phone rang. It wasn't a number he recognized. Hesitant, he answered, "Hello, John Brennan. Who is this?" "You're talking to Kraka," came the reply. If anyone else had received that call, it might have seemed like a prank, a teenager goofing off with someone's contact information. But Brennan wasn't anyone else. He was the director of the CIA, the man who oversaw the United States' most sensitive intelligence operations. He had faced threats before, but this call felt different, unnerving in its casual, confident tone. "How did you get this number?" Brennan asked, trying to maintain composure. "It was so easy, bro. You're such a dumb." "What do you want?" "I don't want anything. I already own you," said the voice on the other end. "And how much do you want?" Brennan pressed, disbelief lacing his words. "We want $5 trillion, came the absurd reply. Brennan's mind raced. This wasn't just some random hacker. This was something far more organized. Something that could threaten not just him personally, but the infrastructure of the intelligence community itself. The U.S. government would later classify the incident as part of a larger conspiracy involving identity theft, harassment of high-ranking officials, and cyber terrorism. The perpetrator would eventually pay a price, but at that moment, Brennan had no way of knowing how deep the rabbit hole would go. On the other side of the Atlantic, in a modest house in the West Midlands of England, a 15-year-old kid sat in his bedroom, phone in hand, high on marijuana, eyes wide with disbelief at what he had just done. This was Kraka, leader of a small collective of hackers called Krakas with Attitude. He and his companions had embarrassed the U.S. intelligence apparatus to a degree that few could imagine. They had leaked personal data of FBI agents, police officers, and DOJ officials. They had hand-delivered sensitive documents to Julian Assange. They were part of a larger hacker collective known online as Anonymous, a decentralized group that thrived in chaos, trolling, activism, and political disruption. Kraka's story was not unique. The world of cyber activism had many young players learning and experimenting in their bedrooms, testing the boundaries of law, morality, and technology. In 2008 in Virginia, another teenager only known as Default began exploring this shadowy world. A typical American teen with soccer, video games, and a dog, Default found his curiosity piqued by one simple act: cheating in video games. That small act of bending the rules opened a door into the world of hacking, giving him the first taste of power that comes with manipulating computers. Default discovered that computers, like people, could be persuaded, tricked, and manipulated. He started with small hacks, just for the thrill, then moved to bigger, more daring exploits. By immersing himself in the secretive chats of Anonymous, he gained a front-row view of some of the most daring online activism of the time. Anonymous represented a unique kind of freedom: power without leaving the bedroom, influence without authority, a way to force the world to pay attention through chaos. But the Anonymous community was not without its dangers. It was crawling with federal agents, rival hackers, and endless infighting. Vetting members was difficult, trust was scarce, and the thrill of trolling could easily cross into criminal activity. Default, realizing the risks, sought out smaller offshoot groups, including one called AnonSec. AnonSec carried a similar ethos to Anonymous, hacking for political causes, or simply for challenge the laws, as they called it. Within AnonSec, Default honed his skills. He learned to control a botnet, a network of infected computers, which could be used to spread malware, crash servers, or access sensitive information. One day, curiosity led him to a server belonging to Windsor University, a Canadian medical school. Suddenly, He found himself staring at the financial records of students who owed money to the institution, $9.4 million in total. And at the bottom of the list was an enticing button, delete all. Default hesitated only briefly before acting. To him, erasing student debt was a small act of justice, a way to correct systemic wrongs. Some owed tens of thousands, some over $100,000. Default deleted it all, knowing it could not be undone. He didn't profit financially. Instead, he felt the intoxicating rush of power of doing something he believed was morally right. While Default played in the gray spaces between legality and justice, another hacker, Kraka, was building his own story. Motivated by politics, anger at U.S. foreign policy, and a deep frustration with corruption, he focused particularly on Palestine and Gaza. Kraka's early exploits included hacking James Clapper, then the Director of National Intelligence, finding his phone number and rerouting his calls to the Free Palestine movement. This audacious act caught Default's attention, and the two began collaborating online. By 2015, the partnership between Kraka and Default had grown more sophisticated. They targeted more high-ranking intelligence officials, culminating in an audacious hack of John Brennan. Head of the CIA, Brennan, like many in government, had left traces of himself online, public addresses, phone numbers, and insufficiently secured accounts. Using social engineering and publicly available information, Kraka accessed Brennan's Verizon account, obtained his PIN, and gained control of his email. From there, the floodgates opened. They spam-called Brennan relentlessly, spreading chaos in his personal life, while Default advised and supported from afar. But the pranks were only the beginning. The email breach gave them access to sensitive documents, which they eventually shared with WikiLeaks. Julian Assange published them in October 2015, exposing Brennan's 47-page SF-86 application, a form containing psychological evaluations, past drug use, and other personal details. In addition, internal correspondence revealed controversial Bush-era recommendations on Middle Eastern operations and suggestions for legalizing future interrogation methods. The fallout was massive. The breach cost the CIA $1.5 million in damages, forced relocation of operatives, and publicly embarrassed one of the most secretive institutions in the world. Security experts admitted the hack had been laughably easy, relying mostly on negligence and poor personal security practices. For Default and Kraka, the thrill of success was short-lived. FBI and UK authorities began closing in. Default, overconfident and careless, revealed his involvement while drunk during an online chat. The FBI raided his home, confiscating his hard drives, nearly 1,000 bitcoins, and all evidence of his exploits. Default would face a 5-year federal sentence, solitary confinement, and $145,000 in restitution. Kraka, underage, received a more lenient sentence in the UK, 2 years in a juvenile detention center, the first minor convicted of hacking in the United Kingdom. Yet the story does not end there. The ripple effects of their actions continue to inspire debate about privacy, security, and the balance of power between citizens and governments. Snowden's revelations, which had exposed widespread U.S. surveillance, had already set the stage for questioning authority. Default and Kraka's exploits were another step in this ongoing struggle, a demonstration that even teenagers in bedrooms across the world could challenge the most powerful institutions on Earth. By December 2023, these questions remained urgent. The Biden administration renewed controversial surveillance programs, allowing monitoring of anyone worldwide without a warrant. Misuse of the database had already been rampant, with thousands of unlawful searches recorded between 2016 and 2020, targeting political donors, protesters, and activists. The world had changed, but the lessons from Kraka, Default, and Snowden remained clear. The line between justice and lawlessness, between activism and crime, could be walked by anyone, and the consequences could be life-altering. The story of the kids who hacked the CIA is more than just a tale of pranks, botnets, and stolen emails. It is a story about power and morality in the digital age, a cautionary tale about the risks of challenging institutions, the seduction of influence, and the unpredictable consequences of teenage rebellion in a world dominated by information. As the dust settled from their audacious breaches, the world around Kraka and Default continued in stark contrast to the chaos they had sown. Kraka, in his quiet neighborhood in the West Midlands, grew up in a town shaped by the echoes of old coal mines, where economic hardship and limited opportunity created a breeding ground for frustration. The streets were often empty by nightfall, and the most exciting adventures were found online. He had spent years glued to forums, lurking in chat rooms, learning from older hackers, piecing together knowledge like a digital scavenger. His interest in global politics, particularly in U.S. foreign policy, was sparked by news footage from Gaza, images that haunted him late into the night. Default's world was different, but no less formative. Growing up in suburban Virginia, his father worked for the government, instilling a complicated mix of respect and rebellion in him. Conflict at home over authority and privacy made Default sensitive to the overreach of institutions. Video games became his escape, and soon he realized that the same logic that applied to manipulating game mechanics could be extended to computers themselves. Every exploit he discovered in a game was like a key, unlocking new doors. When he began engaging with Anonymous and later AnonSec, he found a community that validated his abilities, a group where skill mattered more than age or credentials. By 2010, Default had started experimenting with encryption and anonymity software, becoming obsessed with protecting his digital footprint. He learned about Tor VPNs and the importance of using free public Wi-Fi to mask his identity. He began logging in from distant networks, using stolen Wi-Fi signals, and never reusing passwords. Every move was calculated, every risk carefully weighed. His obsession with security was more than paranoia. It was necessity. By this point, Default had also accumulated a small fortune in Bitcoin, a digital treasure chest that he would guard as jealously as any medieval knight. Meanwhile, Kraka's motivation remained raw and political. For him, hacking was a weapon, a way to fight injustice in a world that seemed indifferent to suffering. His group, Krakas with Attitude, operated with a blend of mischief and ideology. They didn't just want attention, they wanted accountability. The U.S. presence in the Middle East, drone strikes in Gaza, civilian casualties, they were personal to him, even from thousands of miles away. Every breach, every phone rerouting, every leaked email felt like a strike against a system that ignored the powerless. The collaboration between Default and Kraka represented a merging of skill and ideology. Default brought technical expertise, deep knowledge of botnets, servers, and encryption, while Kraka brought audacity and political focus. Together, they formed a duo capable of breaching some of the most secure networks in the world. Their operations weren't random. They were carefully chosen, timed to maximize exposure and embarrassment of their targets. One of the earliest lessons they learned was how dangerously easy it was to exploit human error. Brennan, Clapper, Giuliano, each had left digital breadcrumbs that, when pieced together, became keys to the kingdom. Social engineering, the art of manipulating people into giving away confidential information, became one of their primary tools. For example, Kraka's call to Verizon tech support pretending to be an on-site technician was a miracle. It was simply knowing what questions to ask, how to sound convincing, and exploiting the system's trust. With each successful breach, their confidence grew, but so did the risk. Default became increasingly meticulous, obsessively documenting his actions while ensuring he left minimal traces. Encryption became second nature, full disk protection a ritual, and anonymity a lifestyle. Kraka, on the other hand, began to understand the weight of consequence. The first time he manipulated a phone line to route calls to the Free Palestine movement, he felt a thrill, but also a pang of fear. If caught, the repercussions wouldn't just be online ridicule. They could be life-altering. Despite their precautions, they underestimated the power of human networks outside of the digital sphere. Default, drunk and careless in a chat room, revealed his involvement to someone he believed trustworthy, a friend. That single slip would ultimately unravel years of careful planning. Meanwhile, Kraka, though more cautious, would also face consequences due to his age and visibility. The legal aftermath of their actions was sobering. Default's arrest and subsequent sentencing to 5 years in federal prison was a stark reminder of how quickly youthful rebellion can collide with the law. Solitary confinement, steep restitution payments, and the loss of nearly 1,000 bitcoins reshaped his reality. Kraka Being underage, avoided the harshest penalties but still faced 2 years in a juvenile detention center, the first minor convicted for hacking in the United Kingdom. Yet the personal consequences were only one layer of the story. The broader impact of their actions rippled through governments, media, and public consciousness. Brennan's personal data exposure, the leak of SF-86 forms, and internal memos about interrogation and torture sparked widespread debate. The public, previously unaware of the inner workings of U.S. intelligence, got a glimpse into the vulnerabilities of even the most secure systems. Cybersecurity experts, journalists, and policymakers began to discuss the importance of digital hygiene, employee vetting, and personal responsibility for securing sensitive information. The story also intersects with global movements. Anonymous, which had inspired Default, continued to influence online activism. Their decentralized structure, focus on anonymity, and ability to generate viral attention became a blueprint for countless other hacker collectives. Some used it for political justice, others for trolling or financial gain. But the influence was undeniable. By learning from Anonymous, Default and Kraka were able to expand the notion that even a teenager with a laptop could challenge powerful institutions. Beyond the immediate consequences, their actions raised profound ethical questions. Was it right to hack the CIA for political reasons? To delete student debts? To expose high-ranking officials' private information? Default, in later reflections, recognized a gray area. The line between political justice and criminality, between activism and harm, was dangerously thin. Kraka, now older and keeping a low profile, had similar reflections. Both had learned that the thrill of empowerment comes with a price that is often higher than anticipated. The narrative of these two teenagers also intersects with the story of whistleblowers like Edward Snowden. Snowden, who had exposed the U.S. government's mass surveillance programs, had already shown that intelligence agencies could be vulnerable to insider knowledge. Default and Kraka's actions, though not as globally transformative as Snowden's, demonstrated that digital power could extend beyond whistleblowers to ordinary individuals. In essence, it was a generational continuation of challenging authority in a world increasingly defined by digital information. By 2023, these lessons remain critical. The Biden administration renewed surveillance programs, allowing monitoring of global communications without warrants. Misuse had already been rampant, affecting political donors, protesters, and activists. The shadow of Default and Kraka's actions lingered as a warning. The tools of surveillance can be countered by knowledge, skill, and audacity, but the consequences are inescapable. In the end, the story of the kids who hacked the CIA is not just about pranks, stolen data, or political activism. It is a tale of power, morality, and technology. It is a cautionary story about ambition and rebellion in the digital age, about the choices one makes when the keyboard becomes a sword, the internet a battlefield, and adolescence a time of extraordinary risk. And it reminds us that in a world dominated by information, even the smallest actors can challenge the mightiest institutions, sometimes changing lives forever, sometimes paying the ultimate price. By the time Default and Kraka had established their online partnership, they had already mastered the art of digital camouflage. Default, in his Virginia bedroom, had turned operational security into an obsession. Every keystroke, every online move was calculated. He never logged into his home Wi-Fi, fearing traceable IP addresses. Instead, he would ride the digital currents of nearby public Wi-Fi networks, coffee shops, fast food chains, libraries, never staying in one place for too long. A satellite dish in his backyard allowed him to tap into distant connections, encrypting his traffic through layers of anonymizing nodes, bouncing across continents in milliseconds. Kraka, though younger and less technically disciplined, relied on boldness and ingenuity. While Default meticulously mapped networks and maintained logs of exploits, Kraka often approached hacking like a game of improvisation, spontaneous, risky, and entirely audacious. Where Default saw a protocol to circumvent, Kraka saw a challenge to overcome, a puzzle that had to be solved in real time. Together, they formed a complementary team, the meticulous planner and the reckless improviser, each feeding off the other's strengths. Their first major operations were exploratory. Default would map networks of interest, scanning for vulnerabilities, while Kraka would test the limits of social engineering. One of their earliest successes involved rerouting calls to James Clapper's house. It began innocuously. Kraka, using publicly available information, located Clapper's home number. A few clicks later, the line was diverted to a hotline supporting the Free Palestine movement. It was a small victory, but it demonstrated a simple truth. Even the most powerful officials could be manipulated with minimal effort. These early exploits were almost playful, a digital game of cat and mouse. But as their confidence grew, the stakes increased. Accessing Brennan's Verizon account was not simply about curiosity. It was a calculated infiltration. Kraka posed as an on-site technician, fabricating an employee code on the spot. The internal support staff, believing him authentic, granted him full access. Suddenly, Brennan's private email, phone number, and sensitive account information were in Kraka's hands. Default guided Kraka through the next steps, emphasizing operational discipline. They carefully navigated Brennan's email, downloading sensitive documents while leaving no obvious trace. Screenshots were taken, metadata stripped, and files prepared for potential exposure. The thrill of accessing such high-level information was intoxicating, both as a technical challenge and as a form of symbolic justice. The documents themselves were staggering. Brennan's SF-86 form, containing psychological evaluations, prior drug use, and personal history. Internal memos from the Bush administration outlining Middle Eastern strategy. Congressional correspondences on interrogation techniques. For Default and Kraka, this was not merely a hack. It was a revelation. The decision to share these documents with WikiLeaks marked a pivotal moment. Julian Assange, recognizing the sensitivity, published the information in October 2015. The leaks sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. The CIA was publicly embarrassed. Brennan's private life was scrutinized. Security protocols were exposed as laughably inadequate. For a moment, teenagers had succeeded where professional intelligence operatives had failed. They had breached the inner sanctum of the most secretive agency in the world. But the euphoria was short-lived. The FBI, MI5, and other agencies quickly mobilized. Default, despite his careful precautions, made a single critical error. During a late-night chat, intoxicated and overconfident, he casually mentioned his involvement. The slip was small but fatal. Within days, law enforcement had traced the digital breadcrumbs back to his bedroom in Virginia. Kraka, underage in the UK, faced a different kind of pressure. Local authorities, aware of the international attention, coordinated with cybercrime units. Raids were executed quietly but efficiently. Computers, servers, and storage devices were seized. The threat of incarceration loomed, but his age afforded some leniency. For Default, there was no escape. The FBI arrived unannounced, weapons drawn, sweeping through his room as he decrypted a hard drive containing nearly 1,000 bitcoins. They confiscated everything: computers, encryption devices, and financial records. Default's world, built over years of meticulous planning, collapsed in moments. Prison became a harsh teacher. Solitary confinement, restitution fees, and the psychological toll of incarceration reshaped him. 2 years later, Default would reflect on his actions with clarity. I thought what I was doing was right in terms of political justice, but I realized I was completely wrong. Kraka, released from juvenile detention, opted for a quiet life, focusing on cybersecurity and leaving crime behind. Despite the personal consequences, their actions had lasting impact. The CIA and other intelligence agencies were forced to reevaluate internal security. Officials were reminded that no system was impervious, no officer infallible. Public discourse shifted. Americans and citizens worldwide began questioning surveillance practices, data privacy, and the ethical boundaries of power. These hacks also highlighted the global influence of Anonymous and its offshoots. The decentralized model, with its emphasis on anonymity, chaos, and accountability, had inspired a generation of digital activists. Hacktivism, once dismissed as a niche subculture, was now a legitimate form of political protest, capable of influencing policy, attracting media attention, and altering public perception. Through this lens, Default and Kraka's story becomes more than a tale of teenage mischief. It is a study in power dynamics, an exploration of digital ethics, and a reflection on human curiosity In the age of information, they demonstrated how ordinary individuals, armed with knowledge, audacity, and a laptop, could challenge institutions that had long been considered untouchable. Even years later, the reverberations of their actions were evident. Surveillance programs continued, often misused, demonstrating that while technology empowers, it also exposes vulnerabilities. And while Default and Kraka had faced consequences, their story serves as a cautionary tale and an inspiration. The digital battlefield is vast, the stakes are high, and the line between justice and legality is perilously thin. By late 2014 and early 2015, Default and Kraka had refined their methods into a repeatable process. Their operations were no longer random experimentation. They had become carefully orchestrated campaigns, a combination of technical skill, psychology, and opportunistic improvisation. One of their first lessons was understanding the human element in security. While network firewalls, encryption, and passwords were standard defenses, it was people who remained the weakest link. Social engineering became a cornerstone of their strategy. Kraka excelled here. He would impersonate technicians, government contractors, or even journalists, exploiting the trust of unsuspecting employees. A convincing tone of authority, coupled with seemingly legitimate credentials, often yielded access to emails, phone rerouting, and internal databases. Default, meanwhile, focused on the digital infrastructure. He mapped out IP addresses, identified unsecured servers, and built script to automate tedious scanning tasks. He became fluent in programming languages, penetration testing tools, and malware deployment strategies. The duo's synergy was evident. Kraka's human-based exploits opened doors, and Default's technical prowess allowed them to walk through them and remain unseen. Their first major success with Brennan's email set a template. Kraka, armed with his Verizon employee code fabrication, gained access to Brennan's account. Default instructed him to extract sensitive documents, but to be careful, metadata could reveal the breach. Each file was stripped of location and user data, then encrypted multiple times before transfer. It was a process that combined thrill with extreme caution, a delicate dance of audacity and discipline. Once the documents were in their hands, they faced another challenge: distribution. WikiLeaks became the logical choice, a trusted intermediary with a proven track record. The duo's first submissions included Brennan's SF-86 form, emails revealing operational strategies, and congressional correspondence regarding interrogation methods. The publication in October 2015 caused immediate embarrassment for the CIA. Intelligence officers found themselves questioning how such sensitive data could have been so easily exposed. At the same time, they expanded operations to other intelligence officials. James Clapper, then Director of National Intelligence, became a target. Using open-source intelligence OSINT, they located personal contact information and social media accounts. Kraka rerouted Clapper's home phone, sending it to pro-Palestine channels, while Default probed for unsecured accounts that could lead to internal communications. The dual approach of psychological disruption and technical infiltration became their hallmark. Their tactics also included botnets, networks of compromised computers under remote control. Default managed AnonSec's botnet infrastructure, deploying malware to expand control over infected machines. This allowed them to execute distributed denial of service, DDoS, attacks against websites, overload servers, and gain deeper access to networks. For example, when they wanted to draw attention to Danish animal abuse laws, they used botnets to crash official websites and post to face pages highlighting the issue. The effect was immediate. Governments, media, and activists were all forced to confront the issue. Yet, despite their sophistication, human error remained a constant threat. Default slip while chatting online revealed his involvement to someone outside the circle. The FBI, trained in digital forensics and cyber tracking, quickly followed the trail. Raids were swift. In Virginia, agents entered Default's bedroom as he decrypted a hard drive containing nearly 1,000 bitcoins. Every piece of hardware, every storage device, was seized. It was a moment of stark realization. No amount of technical skill could fully insulate them from consequences. Kraka faced a parallel reality. The British police, alerted to the international implications, raided his home. Being underage offered some leniency, but the message was clear. No one is untouchable, not even the audacious 15-year-old who had rattled the CIA. His juvenile detention sentence marked a legal precedent, the first minor in the UK to face imprisonment for hacking at that scale. Even after their arrests, the repercussions of their actions persisted. Sensitive data leaks forced agencies to reassess internal security protocols. Brennan's personal information, Clapper's communications, and DOJ and FBI records were now public knowledge. While some viewed the duo as reckless criminals, others framed them as digital activists, exposing vulnerabilities and holding powerful institutions accountable. Default, while incarcerated, reflected on his journey, the thrill of empowerment, the feeling that a teenager could challenge the world's most powerful institutions, was addictive. But the reality of prison, restitution, and lost fortunes in cryptocurrency offer a sobering counterbalance. Kraka, meanwhile, shifted focus toward legitimate cybersecurity work, leaving behind a life of online subversion. Their story also highlighted the ethical gray zones of modern hacking. Deleting student debts at Windsor University was illegal, but morally, Default rationalized it as justice for perpetual financial burden. Exposing Brennan's emails was criminal, yet it revealed systemic vulnerabilities. Hacking to bring attention to animal abuse might seem noble, but it raised questions about legality versus morality. For every action, the line between right and wrong blurred. In the broader landscape, their exploits fit within a global movement of hacktivism. Anonymous, their inspiration, demonstrated the power of decentralized action and online activism. While some members pursued political justice, others exploited vulnerabilities for profit or amusement. Default and Kraka were part of this continuum, a younger generation learning from the lessons of those before them. The repercussions of their actions echoed into modern surveillance debates. The renewal of controversial surveillance programs in 2023 demonstrated that the tension between state power and individual privacy was far from resolved. Illegal access to databases, monitoring of political groups, and unwarranted surveillance continued, reminding us that the balance of freedom and security remains precarious. Ultimately, the story of Default and Kraka is not just about teenage rebellion. It is about power, ethics, and technology, and how individuals, even those underestimated by society, can influence global institutions. Their tale is a cautionary story about ambition, curiosity, and the cost of challenging authority in a digital world. The saga of Default and Kraka didn't just end with arrests or detention. It was the beginning of a lasting legacy in cyber activism and digital ethics. Even after the FBI had confiscated Default's hard drives and Kraka had served his juvenile sentence, their story circulated widely across forums, social media, and hacker networks. Analysts dissected every exploit, journalists wrote countless articles, and young hackers everywhere looked at their audacity as proof. The system could be challenged, but only at a great personal cost. In the quiet aftermath, Default reflected on the paradox of power in the digital age. He had been an ordinary teenager, a young man with a passion for video games and computers. Yet through curiosity and skill, he had disrupted the operations of the world's most powerful intelligence agencies. The feeling was intoxicating, a mix of empowerment, fear, and responsibility. He realized that knowledge itself was a form of power, and that wielding it without caution could have consequences far beyond his imagination. Kraka, on the other hand, found a different path. In the UK, away from the chaos of international headlines, he began to rebuild his life. He focused on education, cybersecurity certifications, and learning the principles of ethical hacking. While his teenage exploits will forever define his reputation, he had a chance to redirect his skills toward constructive impact, helping organizations defend against the very vulnerabilities he had once exploited. Their story also sparked important conversations worldwide. Governments, intelligence agencies, and corporations were forced to acknowledge the vulnerabilities within their systems. Policies were revised, cybersecurity training improved, and internal auditing became a priority. But more importantly, the public started asking uncomfortable questions. How secure is our personal information? Who watches the watchers? And what happens when ordinary people decide to take matters into their own hands? Default and Kraka had shown that in the digital era, the line between individual and institution, between teenager and agency head, could blur in an instant. One wrong click, one email, one phone call. It could unravel carefully constructed systems and expose secrets that no one expected to be revealed. Yet, despite the chaos they unleashed, the story also carried a cautionary message. Their journey illustrated that talent without guidance can be dangerous, and moral conviction without foresight can lead to life-altering consequences. The thrill of hacking, the adrenaline rush of circumventing digital walls, and illusion of invincibility are compelling, but the cost is always high. Default lost freedom, fortune, and years of his youth. Kraka risked his safety and future. In the end, the story of these kids who hacked the CIA is a story of power, responsibility, and the evolving digital battlefield. It is a story that reminds us that in the modern world, knowledge is not just information, it is influence. And influence, when wielded without care, can change lives, governments, and history itself. Even today, the shadow of their actions lingers. Intelligence agencies continue to fortify their systems, but every vulnerability revealed by these young hackers remains a lesson. And for the countless young hackers watching from behind their screens, Default and Kraka remain icons. Proof that audacity, skill, and curiosity can challenge the most entrenched powers, but that every choice has consequences. As you reflect on this story, consider the delicate balance between curiosity and caution, between rebellion and responsibility. Think about the power of information in your own life, and how easily it can be misused or protected. If this story captivated you, we want to hear from you. Write your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done if you were in Default or Kraka's shoes? Do you think their actions were justified, or were the consequences too steep? And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of daring digital battles and the hidden world behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We dive deep into the stories that shape our world, uncovering the secrets that most people never get to see. Remember, in the digital age, knowledge is power, but with great power comes great responsibility. Default and Kraka learned it the hard way, and their story serves as a warning, a lesson, and, in some ways, an inspiration for everyone who dares to challenge the rules, explore the unknown, and confront the powerful. As the dust settled on the chaotic exploits of Default and Kraka, the world slowly began to take stock. Intelligence agencies reassessed their internal security, recognizing that even the highest-ranking officials were only as safe as the weakest human link. Policies were rewritten, passwords became more complex, and security awareness training became mandatory at every level. The story of these teenagers who had breached the CIA and other federal institutions became a cautionary tale for governments and corporations alike. Default, spending time in federal prison, had a lot of time to think. For a young man who had once believed he was enacting justice, the reality of incarceration was sobering. The adrenaline-fueled thrill of hacking, of making the powerful accountable, had come at an enormous cost. He lost his freedom, his hard-earned bitcoins, and crucial years of his youth. Yet, within that confinement, Default also learned something profound. Knowledge without responsibility is dangerous, but knowledge combined with wisdom can be transformative. Kraka's path was different, but equally instructive. After serving 2 years in juvenile detention, he returned to UK with a renewed focus. He pursued education, certifications in cybersecurity, and built a career defending against the very vulnerabilities he once exploited. The world he had once viewed as a target had now become a place where his skills could create positive impact. For Kraka, hacking had evolved from a game, from a political statement, to a tool for constructive change. Yet, despite the different paths they took, both teenagers' actions left a lasting imprint. The leaks they orchestrated exposed the vulnerabilities of the most secretive institutions in the world. They forced public debates about the ethics of surveillance, government overreach, and the limits of power. The exposure of Brennan's personal documents, Clapper's communications, and DOJ and FBI internal databases highlighted that no system, no matter how secure, is infallible. The broader hacker community also felt the ripple effects. Anonymous, AnonSec, and countless other collectives were inspired by the audacity of these young hackers. Their story reinforced the power of decentralized action, of individuals challenging authority through skill, creativity, and courage. But it also sent a clear warning. Actions have consequences, and even the smallest slip, like Default's drunken confession, can unravel years of careful planning. The personal lessons were equally profound. For Default and Kraka, life after the hacks was a delicate balance between reflection and resilience. They came to understand that the line between justice and legality is perilously thin, that curiosity and audacity can be exhilarating yet destructive, and that true impact often requires patient strategy and ethical consideration. For the public, their story remains a reminder of the power and danger of the digital age. We live in a world where information is currency, where a single person with a computer can expose secrets, disrupt institutions, and challenge authority. But it is also a world where choices carry weight, where morality and responsibility must guide actions, and where one misstep can change lives irrevocably. As Default and Kraka reflect privately on their journeys, they would likely remind anyone listening that the story of these hacks is not just about thrill or rebellion. It is about awareness, ethics, and the responsibility that comes with knowledge. They highlight the critical tension of our era: freedom versus security, curiosity versus caution, action versus consequence. So as we close the story of these kids who hacked the CIA, consider this. The digital battlefield is vast, the stakes are high, and anyone with skill, courage, and curiosity can make a difference, but must always weigh the cost. Default and Kraka's tale is a mirror to the possibilities and perils of our connected world, a lesson in power, morality, and the human spirit. If this story captured your attention, we want to hear from you. Write your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in their shoes? Were they heroes, vigilantes, or simply reckless teenagers? How do you view the balance of digital power and responsibility? And if you want more stories like this, deep dives into hidden worlds, secrets behind global events, and untold tales of power, technology, and human courage, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We explore the stories that shape our world, revealing truths that most people never get to see. Remember, in the digital age, knowledge is power, but power without responsibility can be catastrophic. Default and Kraka's story is a testament to the audacity of youth, the lure of curiosity, and the consequences that follow. Let their journey remind you, every click, every decision, every action matters, and sometimes it can change the world forever.